Hey everybody, it's good to see you guys on this Tuesday night. It's been a long time since we've done a cryptid show, and yeah, been a long time actually. So thought we could try one tonight. Something different, So not sure if you guys are even familiar with the subject that we're going to be talking about tonight. I know Shadow Files knows. He knows where this originates from, but if you guys can see me okay, hear me okay, throw me a 7x7 in the chat, and I'll swing back and say hello to everybody. Let's see. I know TJ was in here earlier. TJ, always good to see you. Let's see. Linda's Prepper Kitchen. How's it going, Linda? Good to see you. Shadow Files knows the connection. Mothman, that's right. We're going to be talking a bit about Mothman tonight also. Yep. Bubble Bibble, good to see you. And there's our brother Nate, good to see you. The Nut House, I'm going to try to time my break to match up with the beginning. All right, hope to see you for a bit. There is Miss Lake Fairy. Cashew, how's it going? Good to see you, good to see you. Cashew and TJ Squatchy. How lucky am I? Yeah. So nice for Bigfoot to treat us with a cryptid. Well, hopefully we have some fun tonight. Normally I try to put together a slideshow with pictures and stuff like that, but I'm going old school tonight, and we're going to look through some. I'm going to try to present this story through newspaper clippings. So that's how we're going to try it anyway. But I appreciate you being here, TJ Squatchy. And check this out. Boggy Creek Monster. This hat I got from Miss TJ Squatchy. So thank you very much. I love this hat. Let's see. Who else we got in here? We got Conservative Patriot. Good to see you. CJ 1975, how's it going? Good to see you. We got some 7x7s. We got a shift kicker in the house. How's it going? Norma, good to see you. Good to see you. Celestial Preps, always good to see you. Hope you're doing well tonight. It's the Marshmallow Man. How's it going? Mom is going to worry flying high again. Hey, everybody. That's Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah, I believe it is. Look who else we got here. We got Crazy Irish. How's it going tonight? Good to see you. Trusting God first. Sorry, had to fight commercials. So TJ has this hat also. Yeah, and just so also have this hat, Squatch Life, and ironically, this is from the other TJ Preps. Here comes TJ. So appreciate them. So TJ Squatchy, you need to wear your hat so we can match tonight. Let's see, we got Juanita. Good to see you. Let's see. Am I caught up yet? See, we got ER. How's it going tonight, Eric? Good to see you. There's our brother TH2. How's it going tonight? And I think that catches us up. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about, maybe it's a cryptid. Well, maybe we need to start and just talk about what cryptids are. Cryptids are, I'll just say, beings that can neither be proven or disproven that they exist. And the study of those, the study of cryptids, it's just something I have a fascination with. And I like to research them and go back in history, find out where these stories began. Obviously, I'm a fan of Bigfoot. He's probably the most famous cryptid on the face of the planet. You got the Loch Ness Monster. But tonight we're going to be talking about one that's maybe not quite so well known. and we're going to be talking about Indrid Cold. And yeah, like the chupacabra. Chupacabra is another cryptid. So I'm going to ask you guys in chat, you guys ever heard of Indrid Cold? If you've heard of Indrid Cold, put a 1 in the chat. And if you've never heard of Indrid Cold, put a 2 in the chat. I'm just curious. I don't think everybody would know, or maybe haven't heard of Indrid. Okay, we got some 1s and 2s coming in. Mountaineer Memo. In the chapter in the book about Indrid Cold was the creepiest or close to it. The black cars was bad because I heard stories when I was a kid. All right. So we got a lot of 2s, actually. Crazy Irish. Geez, I only got puckwudgies. You're lucky to have puckwudgies. Oh, TH2, come on. Wrong stream, brother. So, okay, so let me change that. It seems like Indrid Cold may be a little bit unfamiliar to most. So let me change the question. Put a 1 in chat if you've ever heard of the Mothman. A 1 for Mothman if you've heard of him, and a 2 if you have never heard of Mothman. I'm just curious. I want to see the difference in how well these cryptids are known. Yeah, we got a bunch of 1s coming in for Mothman. Mothman is, we've actually done two or three streams on the Mothman, and you can't really tell the story of Indrid Cold without talking about the Mothman, because he's saturated in that story. So we're going to be touching on the Mothman tonight. So yeah, many know many know the stories of the Mothman and the collapse of the Silver Bridge. You know, those are classic stories, and they're very famous, and there's been movies made of them. The Mothman is pretty big as far as its exposure. A lot of people know the Mothman, but buried deep in that mystery of the Mothman, there was a story in there that it's equally as creepy. There's a story kind of that got covered up with the Mothman. Well, when the Mothman story hit media headlines, it turned that tiny little town of in West Virginia into a media circus. You know, Point Pleasant, West Virginia blew up with media. And this other story that happened just prior to the Mothman and the Silver Bridge incident, it kind of got glossed over. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to be looking at this equally as creepy cryptid that's interwoven into the story of the Mothman. So tonight we look into the story of Indrid Cold. All right, well, that creepy intro was a creation of my wife, Miss Lake Fairy. So you can thank her for that bit of creepiness. But yeah, those are some of the pictures, some of the descriptions of Indrid Cold, Indrid Cold. Yeah, I hear you guys are talking about the Silver Bridge, right? Mountaineer mammal collapsed in 1967. Yes. Yep. So I do want to add, before we get going too far, that in the description of this stream, I put a link. There's a link to a YouTube video, and we're going to be talking about this gentleman here in just a moment, and we're going to talk about his encounter, which is really what kickstarted the whole Indrid Cold story. But that link that is in the description of this stream, if you click that, you can actually watch on YouTube I don't know whether it's a radio interview or a television interview. I think it's a radio interview that you can listen to. His name's Woodrow Derenberger, and he describes his encounter with Indrid Cold. It's hard to say. Indrid. It's not a natural word. Indrid Cold. Hey, Nuthouse. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. So that's what I wanted to start with. I want to put up a picture here, and this is going to be from an old newspaper clipping. And the reason I like to use newspaper clippings, it's just history. It's history, and it shows the impact that these stories had on these communities. You know, when this gentleman Woodrow Derenberger, when he went to the media about his story, it hit the newspapers, and this tiny little town, this was like front page news. So it's fascinating to me just to go and look at these newspaper clippings, and we're going to look at this clipping, and we're going to see the dates, and I want to show you how this ties in to the Mothman and that whole story. So let me put this up on the screen here. Let's see. There we go. Okay, you see this is an old newspaper. It's called the Raleigh Register. Okay, and I want to make this big so we can see the date on this. This is in Beckley, West Virginia. And you can see that it cost 7 cents, which is fascinating in itself. But this was Friday afternoon, November 4th, 1966. So we already know that the Silver Bridge collapsed in 1967. So this preceded that. This preceded this incident with Indrid Cold. It preceded most of the Mothman encounters. So it ties in very closely with it. Okay, and this is the front page of this newspaper. Okay. Now take a look at the headline of that top article. It says Parkersburg salesman speaks with spaceman. Now, when's the last time, other than some of those crazy newspapers that you see in the grocery store aisle, when's the last time you've seen a headline that said something like that? Parkersburg salesman speaks with spaceman. Pretty incredible. But I want to get a good chunk of our story right here from this article, because these are his words that he gave to the media. So instead of embellishing, let's see what he had to say. And again, much of this Woodrow Derenberger, his story, if you click the link in the description, you can listen to his interview with the media. Okay, this is in Parkersburg. And I've been through Parkersburg many times. It says, Woodrow Derenberger says he saw a flying saucer, and that's not all. He engaged in conversation with an occupant of the saucer and expects to see the mysterious stranger again. Derenberger, a local salesman, said he didn't believe in flying saucers until his alleged encounter with one about 7:25 p.m. Wednesday. A vivid description of the unidentified flying object and its occupant was related by Derenberger Thursday in an interview with WTAP TV News director Glenn Wilson. "I think they will, but I hope they don't," Derenberger said. And they spelled his name wrong. Derenberger said of the chances of the spaceman and his companion might fulfill a promise to contact with him again. So this Woodrow Derenberger, he said not only did he talk to this being, he said that this spaceman said that he promised to come back and see him again. So state and local police and a representative of the Air Force recruiting station were present for the news conference. Officers said it was apparent that Derenberger had some sort of experience. Derenberger said it all started shortly before 7:30 p.m. while he was driving home to Parkersburg from Marietta, Ohio on Interstate 77. Now, if you're not familiar with Marietta, Ohio, and that path to Parkersburg, West Virginia, it takes you right over the Ohio River. And you already start to see the connections with this story and the Mothman, because very similar paths. The Silver Bridge crossed the Ohio River in much of that same area. Let's continue. As he approached the West Virginia 47 interchange, Derenberger said a dark, long object, traveling about the same speed as his panel truck, cut in front of my vehicle and continued to travel at some distance sideways. Derenberger described the object as being dark, charcoal gray, apparently made of some kind of metal, and shaped something like an old kerosene lamp globe, having a flat bottom and a dome-like top. Sounds like he's describing a spacecraft to me. There was no visible light, and the object emitted a fluttering, soft noise as it moved along 8 to 10 inches above the pavement, blocked the highway, and finally stopped. From this point, Derenberger said, a door in the side of the UFO opened, much like a car door, and a man, notice that's in quotation marks, stepped out. The man approached Derenberger's truck and told him to roll down the window. During the following 5 to 10 minute conversation, the saucer occupant communicated with Derenberger through thought waves or mental telepathy. His lips were closed and he smiled constantly. And when you hear of stories of Indrid Cold, that right there is the telltale feature. This where it says he smiled constantly. Indrid Cold is also known as the grinning man or the smiling man. He has an unnaturally large grin that never leaves his face, and that's pretty much terrifying. I would think so. The occupant was described as being 6 feet tall, 35 to 40 years old by our standards, 185 pounds, with dark hair, slicked back, and a dark complexion. He was wearing a short top coat with trousers visible below the coat and his shirt buttoned at the neck. His clothing was blue and quite shiny, having a glistening effect. That's another characteristic that was similar of lots of the Indrid Cold sightings, was he had this shiny blue or shiny green clothing, like a suit. Have no fear. We come from a country that is not nearly as powerful as yours, the intruder said. We mean you no harm. As the man spoke, Derenberger said the saucer hovered in a position 50 to 75 feet over the highway. The man asked Derenberger what the lights were in the distance, and he replied that it was the city of Parkersburg. Derenberger said that the man said a similar place in his country was called a gathering. Derenberger said the man described himself as a searcher and called himself by name as Cold. Before parting, the man told Derenberger he would contact him again and suggested that I thought this was kind of interesting. He suggested that he notify the local authorities. He wanted it to be out there that he was there. The UFO then returned to the scene, and another occupant reached an arm out the door to help his companion back aboard. I didn't catch that the first time I read that. There was another occupant reached an arm out the door to help his companion back aboard. The door closed, sounding much like a car door, Derenberger said, and the UFO burst into the air. And I had to pay money to get to the next page, so we don't have the next page. But that's the beginning of the story of Indrid Cold. Just going to take a look at chat for a second. Hey, Rose, good to see you. Good to see you. Ragnar, if I didn't say hi, good to see you. Let's see, Ragnar Ventures, Smiling Man or Indrid Cold is all I know so far. Vineyard Chicks, what was the name of that city? That was Parkersburg, West Virginia. And Indrid Cold, he described those cities as a gathering. Hey, Firefly, good to see you. Good to see you. So here you have this Woodrow Derenberger, who's in Ohio, Marietta. He's a sewing machine salesman, and he's just on his way home. So he crosses over. I gotta put this up here. I can't read this and not laugh. Some giant grinning man getting out of a spaceship. Yep, I would give him my in-laws' address and take off. That's hilarious. So the interesting thing about this encounter was that two other people that on that same night that Woodrow Derenberger reported his experience to the police and to the media, two other people, they encountered the same thing on that same road that night. So this story was backed up a bit by other people. It wasn't just Woodrow who saw this. There were a few people who saw this weird craft and this individual. Two of the individuals who saw it said the same guy got out and tried to come up and ask them questions, but the questions didn't even really make sense. They were just weird questions, so they fled. They just wanted to get away. So that was the big break as far as Indrid Cold. This report in the Raleigh Register, front page news. That's where it all took off. Now there was a report in Elizabeth, New Jersey, about 2 weeks prior to this that didn't really get any media attention, probably because they thought the boys were crazy. But it ended up being they saw a very similar described individual who was standing alongside of a highway behind a fence, and he had that telltale huge grin on his face, and it just wouldn't. That grin did not go away. It was an unnatural grin, and when these boys described the remainder of this man, I do that in quotations. When they described the rest of his facial features, they said his nose wasn't quite right, and even his ears weren't quite right. He just had this massive grin, and his ears and nose wasn't quite right. Let's see. Crazy Iris had something. They say when they first seen the grinning man, he had a reflective green suit with no ears, nose, and hair. Really weird. Yep, that's... Now, Woodrow Derenberger talked about his hair being blacked and slicked straight back. So, yeah, a lot of these are very similar descriptions. And it wasn't an isolated thing. It wasn't something that just happened one time. There were multiple people who witnessed something. And once this hit the front page of the newspaper, many people started coming forward and telling their stories of similar encounters. Let's see. Ragnar says, yeah, we call him the Smiling Man around here in Colorado, but we have no reports around here, I don't think. It's a southern thing. Lake Ferry, we have the Tommyknockers here, old mining legend. I'll have to look into that one. Crazy Iris, yes. Black slicked hair with a blue suit and very tall. Yep. Yeah, so we have our initial sighting of Indrid Cold. And TJ Squatchy, if you're still in the chat, you mentioned Indrid Cold being in something else that you had recently watched. And I was going to look that up, but what was that again? Because Indrid Cold kind of makes some cameo appearances in other things also. After he kind of was, I guess, he got the spotlight here. A doc on Amazon, is that Hellier? I'll have to check that one out. Yeah. So you'll probably hear Indrid Cold maybe in some other things, but it all comes back to this. It all comes back to West Virginia and Woodrow Derenberger. Let's see. Sandra Moody, good to see you. Let's see. So I'm going to switch tabs here. Move to our next. I have another newspaper clipping I want to look at. Okay, because it ties directly into what we're talking about. The date on this, let's see. Let me see if I can find that date on this. This is November 16th. Remember, we were just at November 2nd of 1966. Okay, so November 2nd, Indrid Cold makes his appearance. And then exactly 2 weeks later, November 16th, 1966, this is the Point Pleasant Register. And again, this is the front page of this newspaper. And here we have the first sighting of what became known as the Mothman, 2 weeks after Indrid Cold. And you see the title of this. It says, couple sees man-sized bird, creature, something. And let's take just a quick read of this, because this is the first encounter of the Mothman. And this is why you're talking 2 weeks apart. This is why Indrid Cold gets kind of wrapped up in the Mothman story. It was the timing was very close together. It was in the exact same geographical area, that Point Pleasant, West Virginia area, Charleston, West Virginia. It all pointed back to too many coincidences. And then later we're going to talk about another connection. Rusty, yes, I want to put his comment up on the screen. Wasn't there a Men in Black sighting too? Yes, there were. during the Mothman investigations, there were lots of creepy things that went on, and some of those included sightings of men in black. And these once the report started coming out of the Mothman and these sightings, these quote unquote men in black, they would go around and typically try to silence anyone speaking about this. They didn't want this information getting out. And there's stories of these men in black going into a restaurant and trying to fit in. And so they would go into these restaurants and sit down to eat, and the waitresses would say they didn't even really know how to use the utensils. They would like pick them up and have no clue how to even feed themselves. And there's other stories of these men in black following these witnesses and harassing them. So the men in black, they also tie directly into this, which along that point, Rusty, it kind of made me think maybe there was a connection between Indrid Cold and the men in black, because his description, while it's kind of a little bit different because he's got that gigantic grin, the men in black also have those features that are there's just something off about them. So yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Nice to have you here with us, Rusty. All right, so let's take a look at this article. And this was from November 16th, 1966. So 2 weeks after the Indrid Cold first encounter. It says it was a bird or something. It definitely wasn't a flying saucer. 2 Point Pleasant couples said today they encountered a man-sized bird-like creature in the TNT area about midnight last night. Sheriff's deputies and city police went to the scene about 2 o'clock this morning, but were unable to spot anything. But the two young men telling their story this morning were dead serious and asserted they hadn't been drinking. Probably was the first question. Steve Mallett of 3305 Jackson Avenue. I just love how they give these guys addresses right in the front page of the newspaper. And Roger Scarberry of 809 30th Street described the thing as being about 6 or 7 feet tall, having a wingspan of 10 feet and red eyes, about 2 inches in diameter and 6 inches apart. It was like a man with wings, Mallett said. It wasn't like anything you'd see on TV or in a monster movie. The men and their wives were in Scarberry's car between 11:30 p.m. and midnight when they spotted the creature near the old power plant, adjacent to the old National Guard Armory buildings. So apparently there were some old abandoned buildings, and that's where this thing supposedly would hang out. It says the creature was seen standing on 3 occasions and was described as being extremely fast. They said it flew about 100 miles an hour in flight, but was a clumsy runner. Deputy Millard Halstead said he had seen dust in the vicinity of a coal field, but it could have been caused by the bird, he said. I'm a hard guy to scare, Scarberry said, but last night I was for getting out of there. They did just that, but the thing followed them. They said it was hovering over the car, apparently gliding, until they reached the National Guard Armory on Route 62. We went downtown, turned around, and went back, and there it was again, Mallett said. It seemed to be waiting on us. He said the light gray-like creature then scurried through a field. It also had flown across the top of the car. It apparently is afraid of light, Mallett reasoned, and maybe it thought it was scaring us off. The young men said they saw the creature's eyes, which glowed red only when their lights shined on it, and it seemed to want to get away from the lights. They said it looked like a man with wings, but that its head was not an outstanding characteristic. So that was the first encounter of the Mothman. At this point in time, he didn't have that name, but that was the first reported encounter of what became known as the Mothman. And the weird part was, it is exactly 2 weeks after Indrid Cold appeared to this just random Woodrow Derenberger on this highway. He showed up and had this conversation with him with this gigantic grin. Okay, so that was first sighting of the Mothman. 2 weeks after the first sighting of Indrid Cold. So let me switch screens here. Let's see. That sighting of the Mothman was Tuesday, November 15th, 1966. And 2 weeks before that was the sighting of Indrid Cold, November 2nd, 1966. They're tied very close together. Okay, here is another. Yeah, Rusty, they said it was, what'd they say? They said it was some type of sandhill crane or something like that. It didn't make sense, but that's how science tried to brush off this sighting. And it wasn't just these two couples who saw this creature. Multiple people saw this creature. CJ says Mothman has been sighted in Chicago the last few years. Interesting. Yes, I've actually heard that exact same thing. As far as Chicago, I've heard of sightings going way back to just previous to the accident at Chernobyl. Yep. TJ Squatchy and I are on the same wavelength right here. I listened to a podcast that stated Mothman was sighted over Chernobyl before it boomed. Yeah, I've heard that exact same thing. Now the Mothman is supposed to be like a precursor of some sort to a coming disaster, just like that Chernobyl accident at the nuclear facility, that meltdown. Supposedly Mothman was sighted there. And yes, Rusty, I've also heard that just prior to the Twin Towers on 9/11, the attack, that the Mothman was spotted there as well. It's this harbinger or a precursor to some disaster that is upcoming. So here is another newspaper article. It's from that. It's just after those first few sightings. It says excitement dying down. Let's see. You guys see that? Yeah. Mysterious Mothman is still at large in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I just find this fascinating that this is in their this is in the 1960s newspapers. These people were very concerned. They were concerned. Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The mysterious Mothman was still at large near this normally quiet Ohio River community, but the excitement is dying down. The excitement began 2 weeks ago when Mr. and Mrs. Rogers Scarberry and Mr. and Mrs. Steve Mallet of Point Pleasant saw a large white apparition flying at high speed following their car. They told Deputy Sheriff it looked like a flying man with 10-foot wings. They said it was about 7 feet tall with large red eyes. These reports brought curious crowds to the McClintock Wildlife Station where the incident occurred. Volunteer fire department members had to help keep traffic moving. So you picture this tiny little town. It's in nowhere, USA. And these incidents hit the headlines, and this tiny town, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it turned into a circus, media circus. People just poured into the area. And there's one person we're going to talk about in particular who ended up showing up to investigate this, John Keel. And John Keel's the reason why most people know about the Mothman in all of this. But let's keep reading here, and then we'll get to that. It says, during the next 3 days, at least 8 persons reported various similar creatures. On November 18th, 2 volunteer firemen, Captain Paul Yoder and Benjamin Enoch, said they saw what definitely was a very large bird with large red eyes. Dr. Robert L. Smith, Associate Professor of Wildlife Biology at West Virginia University, said the descriptions all fitted the sandhill crane, the second largest American crane, which stands almost as high as a man and has a wingspan of more than 7 feet. He said the red eyes could be the large circles of bare reddish flesh around the crane's eyes. Smith said the bird apparently had wandered out of its normal migration route. So that's science trying to explain this mystery. This is what makes them cryptids. You know, science can't disprove that they exist, and science can't prove that they exist. That's what makes them cryptids. See, Ragnar says, a sandhill crane, I hunt for them out here. Kind of hard to mistake for this thing. All right. Let's see. Oh, boy. It took me a minute to figure out what MIL was, but I got it now. Just like my mother-in-law, a sighting of Mothman is a precursor to disaster. Oh, boy. Mountaineer Mammal, the TNT area was a World War II era munition storage. All right, good. That's good stuff. Let's see. Grinning Owl, I have a subscription to the archive for our city's newspaper. I will see if they have any articles on these sightings. This is very interesting stuff. That would be very cool. That would be very cool. And it really is interesting. You know, it's one thing just to hear stories from people, but to see it backed up and documented in newspapers, that's just fascinating to me. It's something you can research it and find. All right, so at this point in time, we've had going through our timeline here, we've had the sighting of Indrid Cold by multiple people. 2 weeks later, the Mothman shows up, and we start seeing sightings of the Mothman all over this Point Pleasant area, same time period. Now, when the Mothman showed up, people kind of forgot about Indrid Cold. That story kind of faded away a bit because of this gigantic flying moth creature that looks like a man. So that's how the story of Indrid Cold kind of got buried deep in the story of the Mothman. It's kind of hidden in there. Bubble bibble bat squatch. I like it. I like it. Okay, so let's switch to our next clipping. And I tried to go with all newspaper clippings. So all of these sightings in hindsight, now looking back, a lot of people say that all of these sightings of the Mothman, they were leading up to something. This precursor, much like that Chernobyl, much like all of these other periods in history when this creature has showed up and something bad has happened. So I'm going to show you the bad thing that happened. Let's see. Right there. All right, so we have, this was Point Pleasant, the Point Pleasant Register again. And this was December 15th. Let me make this bigger so we can see the dates here. The date on this newspaper clipping is Saturday, December 16th, 1967. It was the previous day would have been Friday, December 15th, that the Silver Bridge collapsed. And you can just see the headline, Silver Bridge tumbles. It's actually an interesting story of the Silver Bridge. It was the connecting bridge between Ohio and West Virginia. It led from Ohio over into Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And apparently there had been issues with the traffic signals throughout the day, and it had traffic backed up. So there were issues that they were dealing with, and rush hour came, and all of these cars, they got backed up on this bridge, and the bridge was in dire need of maintenance. They actually found the parts that failed. But on December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, fully loaded with vehicles. And the official count was that 37 vehicles were on the bridge, and 37 vehicles went into the Ohio River. 37 vehicles, and which contained 46. Well, there were more than 46 people, but there were 46 people who lost their life in the Silver Bridge collapse. So in hindsight, this terrible, horrific incident, people say that the Mothman, his appearance over and over, was a precursor to this horrific incident, this bridge collapsing. I can't even imagine. But 37 vehicles went in, and 46 people died, and it is very sad. So the more I read into all of this, I started to think about the connection between a lot of things. Is there a connection between Indrid Cold and the Mothman? Is there a link between the two? Or is it just completely separate? It seems like to me that that's too close of a difference in time. You're talking about a couple weeks apart, and the air. My wife says totally not a coincidence. I tend to agree. It's the time period was the same region. Indrid Cold, the Mothman, and the Men in Black. All of them are tied into this tiny area of Appalachia, this little town in West Virginia. Yeah, we talked about the Men in Black. Now, before the bridge collapsed, okay, and the reason why most of us know about the Mothman, and the reason why Mothman is so famous, is because there was a certain gentleman named John Keel, and John Keel at the time was not real famous. He was a bit well known, but he was a UFO investigator. And once he started hearing of these stories of the Mothman, and perhaps he even heard the stories of Indrid Cold, but he came to the area to investigate into this. He came in to investigate the Mothman and to see what was going on. Let's see. Yeah, Harvest Merry Moon. It was December 15th. Yeah. Yep. Imagine being in a car going into that ice cold, frigid water. Wouldn't have had much of a chance, that's for sure. So John Keel, during his investigations, he put together the information needed for a book. And that book was the Mothman Prophecies. John Keel wrote a book called the Mothman Prophecies. Now, many years later, there was a movie that came out called The Mothman Prophecies, and it's not the same as the original book. The original book's different. Hollywood did a lot with John Keel's story. But there's an interesting fact about this. While John Keel was investigating this Mothman and all of these, I guess, incidents and all of these sightings, John Keel reported that he had been receiving multiple phone calls from someone claiming to be a very specific person. Who do you think that John Keel said kept calling him? My wife says Indrid Cold. Yes. John Keel says during his investigation, he received multiple phone calls from someone claiming to be Indrid Cold. I found that fascinating. And it is creepy. It is very creepy. But it ties the two stories together. Yeah, TJ Squatchy's got it. Cold called him. Indrid Cold called John Keel. It was either Indrid Cold or it was someone claiming to be Indrid Cold. You know, that's why it's cryptids. Can't prove it one way or the other. But this is the amazing part of that. John Keel says that the final conversation that he had on the phone with Indrid Cold. Oh boy, I got to put this up there. It was a cold call. TJ Squatchy, if you're not like in comedy and making a lot of money somewhere, I think you missed your calling. It was a cold call. Yeah. So John Keel states that his final conversation with this person who claimed to be Indrid Cold. John Keel says that Indrid Cold told him that he should leave the area because a terrible disaster was about to take place. This was before the Silver Bridge collapsed. John Keel says that someone claiming to be Indrid Cold called him and multiple times, and the last conversation that they had was Indrid Cold telling him to leave the area because a terrible disaster was about to take place. And it wasn't long after that. And in the Hollywood movie, The Mothman Prophecies, John Keel, who is played by Richard Gere, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But I think it was Richard Gere. In the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, Richard Gere is there, and he actually dives into the river, and I think he saves one of the women. That's not how that happened. John Keel left. John Keel wasn't there. John Keel, maybe he heeded the warning of this Indrid Cold, and he left. Don't know, but John Keel wasn't there when the Silver Bridge collapsed. When it collapsed and killed the 46 people, John Keel was not in the area. So, whether you believe that the Mothman is a precursor of things or coming disasters, you know, that's kind of up to you. That's why they're called cryptids, because people, you just kind of got to make up your own mind about things. I have a lot of opinions about things like this. You know, I think much of this is pretty demonic stuff. I really do. There's a lot of things out there that can't be explained. You know, the timing of all of this, all of these reports. You had Indrid Cold sightings. 2 weeks later, you had Mothman sightings. And the Mothman sightings didn't stop. They kept going for months and months. And that next year, that's when the Silver Bridge collapsed. It wasn't long after Indrid Cold had that one final phone call with John Keel telling him, you need to leave the area because a terrible disaster is about to take place. And that's the newspaper that you're looking at right there. That's the disaster. Silver Bridge, the connecting bridge over the Ohio River, Ohio to West Virginia, collapsed. And you can tell this is a very early headline because it says the toll is 7 dead and 41 missing. It ended up being 46. 46 people died. So that is the story of Indrid Cold. So now you can say that, yeah, I've heard of Indrid Cold. I know we had a lot of, I asked people earlier in the chat if you'd ever heard of Indrid Cold, and 1 was yes, 2 was no, and there was a lot of 2s. So this is a brief overview of Indrid Cold. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We've been going just about an hour. Yeah, and a couple things. In the description to this stream, to this video, I included a link where you can go and watch and listen to the interview with Woodrow Derenberger and hear it firsthand from him, his reporting to the media on what he saw that night with Indrid Cold. And it wasn't just that night. And Woodrow Derenberger talks about meeting with Indrid Cold on multiple occasions. And there's some crazy stories that go with it too, as far as Indrid Cold taking him basically back to his planet. So that it gets out there kind of bit, but the whole thing is kind of out there. So, and it's just interesting. And what for me makes it worth researching all of this is it's all in the newspaper clippings. These were the town people were terrified. They were terrified. And this was small town USA. You know, you picture these little towns all over this country, and people start seeing stuff, and the media flocks in, and Point Pleasant, West Virginia became an absolute media circus. And Mountaineer Mamo actually brought up something here. That's another thing. Chief Cornstalk. There's a legend of Chief Cornstalk and a curse that he put on that area also. I don't know the exact details, but it was something that the settlers or someone did and ended up getting the area cursed by Chief Cornstalk. So that's another thing. That's another thing. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see. Sandra Moody, I would have been terrified too. Yeah, I think I would have been a little bit. Yep. Harvest Mary Moon, yep, and tried to silence the newspaper reporter. Yep. That was the Men in Black. The Men in Black tried to shut down the newspaper reporter. And yeah, if you want to look up some creepy cryptids, look up the Men in Black. We've done streams on the Men in Black, and there's, yeah, they are connected to a lot of things. Yep. You're right, TJ Squatchy. That curse from Cornstalk. It does sound like Skinwalker Ranch curse. Yep. Yep. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for a cryptid that you would like to talk about, maybe we can do Men in Black. Maybe we can do. That's the thing with doing some of these cryptids, just like doing Indrid Cold. You can't really talk about Indrid Cold without talking about Mothman, and you can't talk about Mothman without talking about Men in Black, because they're all tied together. So sometimes you have some overlap, but that's just the way it works.
Did you see the comment earlier where they called it a Batswatch?
Yeah, yeah. Just sent Lakey a link in her email, ties in. Okay.
I told her I'd send it.
Trust says, shh, they're watching. Let's see. TJ Squatchy says, Kentucky Goblins. I have never heard of that one. I'll have to try that one. Crazy Irish says, something is connected with the Bridgewater Triangle and Native American chief and the Mothman also, the curse of the lands. Yeah, that's all about a Native American curse in the Bridgewater Triangle. Yeah. Flyaway says, I used to own the Mothman movie at the Mothman Prophecies. I trashed it with all my other movies a couple years ago. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, CJ 1975. My husband requests the Fresno night crawlers. I have to write that one down. I don't even think I've heard of that one. The Fresno night crawlers. And then TJ Squatchy says the Kentucky Goblins. Ooh, here's one that I've always wanted to talk about. The Brown Mountain Lights. That's a good one, Harvest Mary Moon. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. Oh boy. You've been hanging around with TJ Squatchy, Full Monty. I always wanted to be a man in black because I wanted to get jiggy with it. I don't even know if I can laugh at that. So is that the Kentucky Goblins supposedly live in the mines. Rumors they are aliens. Interesting. Shadowfile says you got to do more of these cryptid videos. If you guys like them, we'll do them every once in a while. Lisa, good to see you. I just got in a few minutes ago for the last part, but it sounded very interesting. We'll have to come back and watch later. Glad you could stop by. Yeah, Lake Fairy wants to do Brown Mountain Lights too. Yeah. I think the Full Monty and TJ Squatchy should do have a comedy sideshow. The Full Squatchy. More Crips, please. All right. Harvest Mary Moon. My old high school teacher was from there, Brown Mountain Lights. Yeah, there's some creepy stuff that happened in the Brown Mountains. So was Indrid Cold good and Mothman bad angels? Vineyard Chicks, I don't really know. I honestly can't say that any of them are good. Really? I don't know. And I honestly can't say that any of them are legitimately real. They're just stories that people have told and just interesting. Let's see. Lake Fairy says we used to do cryptids every Tuesday night on my old channel. Lake says we need to do them at least every 2 weeks or every week. You know, I probably did. I don't even know how many streams on Bigfoot, and we did the Mothman a few times. We did Skinwalker Ranch a few times. We did Jersey Devil. We've done a lot. I kind of started running out of ideas. So if you guys can keep giving me some ideas, I'll do the research. I love digging into the old information. Carrie loves cryptids. All right. Let's see. All right, Bubble Bibble, I'm going to look up Bat Squatch. I don't know about this. I might be surprised. Yep, we did Dog Man. Yep. Yep. We could do the horrific cryptid, the MIL cryptid of TJ Squatchy. That would be a scary one. Ragnar says, I'll see what I can find. There's a lot out there. Yep. You did Bridgewater. Yeah, we did the Bridgewater Triangle. We did Black Eyed Children. That one was pretty creepy. Let's see. All right, I think I've been rambling on long enough here, so I'll keep looking for some new ideas. I kind of, maybe we can do Brown Mountain Lights. That one seems pretty. That one seems pretty good. I'll check into that Fresno Nightcrawler, Kentucky Goblins, Brown Mountain Lights, and definitely going to check into Bat Squatch. So, all right. Appreciate you guys all watching. If you haven't, maybe take a minute, hit that thumbs up to help the algorithm or whatever that thing is, so we can get so we can just get it, you know. All right, Crazy Iris is going to look for some stuff. Do they have to be in this country? Got a few. No, they don't. I usually do like to do the ones from here, but it doesn't have to be. Yep. All right, you guys have a great night. I appreciate you all hanging out with us for a bit and watching. And I'm going to, if you guys missed the intro that Lake Fairy made for this, I'm going to play it real quick before we duck out. All right, we'll see you guys. Have a great night.